Hello, and welcome back to our study of Luke chapter 12. I want to get us back into this passage by just reminding us of what Jesus is dealing with in this section. He's dealing with fear and worry. He's going to deal with that in a way in verses 22 to the end of the chapter. In one of the most powerful and hopeful things he says about fear and worry in all of the Bible. And so it's a very important passage as we consider the things that are going on around us right now and as we consider how fragile our lives can seem. And we talked about how Jesus, before he gets into the issue of worry and fear with his disciples, there's something that prompts all this, something that leads him into this. And that is a man stands up in the crowd as Jesus is talking about eternal things, important things, serious things, weighty things. And the man says to Jesus, "Can you help me with my brother's inheritance?" And it shows that that's what really is a picture of what we're often like. That's what's on our minds. We care more about temporal things than we do about eternal things. That's our nature. That's our disposition. We tend to be more mindful of the things that are right directly in front of us than the things that God says are real and true. And so it shouldn't surprise us that this is happening. But Jesus deals with this, and he deals with it in a very profound way. He rebukes the man for trying to make him into something that he's not. And then he warns about making our lives consist of our possessions, building our whole lives on our possessions. And in order to reinforce that warning, Jesus tells this parable. Now, we touched on this last time we looked at it, and I'm going to read the whole parable to you again just to remind you of what it says. Remember, Jesus just finished saying, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Then he goes on to tell a parable about a rich man whose land produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, this rich man, "What shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops?" And he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I will build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.'" Now, all of this is very common. We can understand this. The man feels a sense of security because he has many possessions. But that's exactly the dangerous idea that Jesus is going after. Now, as the parable comes to its end now, in verse 20, Jesus depicts God speaking to this man. And listen to what God says. "But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you.'" Now, I just want to take the rest of this time and just focus on that idea. "Fool, this very night your soul is required of you." Now, when the Bible calls somebody a fool, we need to understand it really is a technical word. Jesus understood the Old Testament. He knew how the word was used. It was used primarily in the Proverbs and in the Psalms. But he's not saying the man's an idiot. I mean, he's no idiot. He's smart. He's resourceful. He's hardworking. He's responsible. There are many good things you could say about this man just in a very general way. And so he's not a dummy, but he is a fool according to the Bible. Now, what does that mean? Well, a fool in the Bible is a person who lives his life without considering the existence of God and particularly the implications of eternity. That's what a fool is. In Psalm 14, verse 1, the psalmist says, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." And that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. If you read this man's story, there's no reference to God at all at any time in this man's life. There's no asking God, "God, what shall I do with my wealth?" There's no reference to God thanking God for his wealth. And so this man lives without reference to God. And that's basically what a fool is. And the other thing that we see is that God says to the man, "This night your soul is required of you." Now that's really interesting because this man was promising his soul. Remember? He said, "I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have all these good things laid up for yourself. Soul, you have nothing to worry about.'" In other words, the man was deceived into thinking that he was in control of his soul. And all of a sudden, God comes and immediately says, "Your soul is required of you. you're going to stand before me and now give an account of how you've lived. And so this parable reminds us very powerfully that we're not in control of our lives, and that our lives can change very quickly. And I think that's something that, as we look at the things that are happening around us, it's a very good time for us to be thinking about that, because it's a time when we can see that happening. People's lives are going to change. My life is changing. Church life is changing. We don't know what life is going to look like after all this blows over. And there are going to be some consequences. And so what Jesus is doing is mercifully, graciously warning us ahead of time. He's saying, look, don't be a fool. Don't live your life as though God did not exist. Realize that your life can change at any moment, and that you're not in control the way you thought you were. And so that's what I would have you focus on now. We'll take a look at the very ending of the parable next time. Thanks for watching.